Did you always know that you were a dancer? Were you always the one who outshone the kids around you?
Well, from a very young age, dance was always something that made me feel alive. I remember watching dance shows and mimicking the moves in the living room, but it was only in high school that I realized this wasn't just a hobby. It was a calling. The way music moved through my body, the confidence it gave me, I felt like home.
Israel, you then go on to study BCom law. But then you say, no, no,
Yes.
no, no, no. I'm not doing this. I'm going to pursue dance. Why leave BCom law?
Um, to be very honest with you, it was a tough decision.
Yeah.
I mean, I come from a background where education is highly valued, and leaving something is as stable as law seemed very risky. But it wasn't, fulfilled obviously in me. I was surprised. I was surviving, not living. Dance gave me purpose. I knew if I didn't follow my passion, I would always regret it. So dance saved me.
Yeah. Israel, I mean, here's the reality, right? You leave BCom law and you experience a couple of challenges after that.
Yes.
I understand that homelessness was one of them. There were personal struggles. What were you going through mentally during that time frame? And what exactly was happening?
Those struggles made me resilient. I realized a lot. And, me living that, I didn't know I was going to be like that. I was going to be like homeless because, going back home, I knew my parents was going to be obviously not be happy with me. So when you've slept on the couch and gone days with no idea where your next meal is coming from, it changes how you see the world. It pushed me to turn the pain into purpose. I knew I wanted to create a space that offers hope, especially to kids who feel unseen.
Israel, pain into purpose is such a powerful statement, right? Yet
Yeah.
it feels almost intangible, When I'm going through the pain that I'm going through, whatever the case may be or wherever it may stem from, it almost feels like that pain is overwhelming. And I say this in the context of our present day because it's multiple things that will come at you. It's not just one issue, right? And so every other additional experience just adds on to the current pain. What was the speech that you had given to yourself? What were the conversations that you had with yourself in order to get to that place where you say, listen, this pain is going to serve me and this pain is going to make me brilliant?
I've always told myself one thing, in life. I've always said, your background does not define your future. Talent alone is not enough. Pair it with discipline, faith, and consistency. Don't be afraid to start small and don't wait for passion. If your gift is creative, it's value with the right mindset and support. You can build a career that reflects your passion.
And with that being said, let's talk about the moments in which we start to see a turnaround in the story, right? I mean, we're going through the struggles, we're turning this pain into purpose. What were the things that you were doing in order to tilt and bring about change in your storyline?
Um, Our School of Dance was born out of a desire to give children access to dance, no matter how their background looked like. Um, I have um, I have one student that I know he had a very tough time growing up. Uh, so that's one thing that I always come back to. I always realize, what, this boy had a lot of complications in life, but ever since he started dancing, it's everything has changed. We had competitions. He only started last year. We had competitions last year. This boy came first in one of the competition in the Subword South African Body of Dance, which is the only dance organization that is affiliated to the IDO. He came first, and then we also danced as a group. he was also part of the group. The group came first. So those are one of the things that I really cheer for, and I I really, really, really feel like, you know what, Israel High School of Dance, it's not just a dance school, but like I just said, I mean, it gives children access to dance no matter how their background. Our vision is to transform lives through movement, building confidence, discipline, and opportunities, obviously, for them.
How did your involvement in the Youth in Mining ESD program come about?
I was fortunate to be selected through an application process. The program believed in my business's potential and gave me access to mentorship, trading, and exposure. So there's a lot of business projections which they really helped me with. I'm really proud to be part of the Pakamani, which is sponsored by the Sibanye.
Let's talk about some of the challenges that you faced when launching your own dance business. You spoke about the successes, right? That young boy who came out first, the group that he was a part of as well. Let's talk about what were the constraints that you had experiences and how did you overcome them?
All right. It was not easy, to be honest, starting without capital, starting from Norway. I would like to say I have a very supportive parents. All the mothers they saw, because from where I used to work and then there's children that followed me, obviously, from where I used to work, and then most of the things that I got it from, obviously, from the programs which I was part of. The first program, which was Noble, and then the Pakamani program. So these programs, they really helped me with funding. Funding was the biggest obstacle, to be honest. The renting of the studio, the equipment, even transport, but also gained the trust in parents. And, when you have the parents' trust, nothing will ever, if you have the parents if the parents, they trust you, you will never go wrong. And I really, that's the most support that I got from the parents.
And in what ways was the support from the Sibanye Stillwater and Pagamani Impact Capital? In what ways did we see them contribute and help to the growth of the Israel Size School of Dance?
Like I said, that funding was the biggest obstacle. They helped me with the studio rent, the equipment, even transport, but also again the trust of the parents and whatever. But me as someone who's just dancing, I had no clue in how to run the business. And the Sibanye and Pakamba, together with Pagamani, they offered coaches, your personal life, personal development coaches. Some of them they coached us through how you run your business, how you differentiate between business and personal stuff. We learned. I really gained a lot from them. I don't know if this is everything.
It is. Let's talk about why you believe that dance is such a powerful tool. What were your personal experiences with dance that made you feel and think, listen, this I want to give back to people. This I want people to experience so they too can be liberated. They too can be creative. They too can thrive.
Because it gives them a voice. This is what I always tell people. Dance is not just the dancing, but dance, it gives them a voice. Dance teaches discipline. Dance teaches confidence, expression, and teamwork as well. It provides a safe space for kids who are often surrounded by violence, poverty, or neglect. It becomes a form of therapy and empowerment. Like I said, there's a student that was referred by a psychologist to my dance studio. He had a lot of complications, but through dance, now that child he hasn't been taking medication. I don't know for how long, because I remember the mom telling me, this child does not take medication anymore, but they see him improving. Even before I started with before I received your call, there's another parent from school in Rustenburg, Hoofddoedoe. The parent called me. She said she is grateful for signing her son with my dance school because ever since the son started, only recently started, but ever since he's still in grade R, if I'm not mistaken. Ever since he started dancing, now his speech is improving. He's also improving at school. He's playing with others in class. So those are the reviews that I would like to share with everyone.
Sure. I'm sitting here and with the biggest smile from ear to ear because we're talking about what one would deem non-related issues, right? How did dance help speech? How did dance help? Like, it's so powerful to see that these motions, these movements with our body can help other parts of our cognitive ability, our ability to build teams, resilience, confidence, all of these things found in the power of dance. Let's talk about the students that you work with. I understand that you just elaborated just now that you work with some students who have special needs. When working with these children, is there a particular way of addressing them that needs to be taken into account? What is your teaching style for the children?
Like I said in earlier, that dance, is the language of the universe. So when you teach dance, you first assess the children. Okay, this one I see, this one is lacking this one is lacking that. And then you sort of come up with one way, a form of, or maybe you use different techniques to make sure that, okay, I'm going to use 3 techniques. And I know within these 3 techniques, all of these children, they're going to see, they're going to grab something out of you. So working with them, it's really, I love working with them because back in school, my favorite subject was always math. So, when you are in math, when you are in a math class and then you solve for X, for example, you become excited. So they make me realize that, if you do something that someone never thought it can happen to a certain person, and then at the end of the day, the person ends up achieving whatever that other people maybe thought this person will never get it. It's such a remarkable experience. You gain something, you love it. So working with them, it's really, I love working with people like that because it doesn't only challenges me, but it gives me it makes me realize that I have not only just the talent, but I have a gift of giving something that nobody or most people did not realize that the certain person, whoever that person, is not going to be capable of. But at the end of the day, they end up seeing changes in those people.
Israel, can anyone dance? Anyone? Because there are people I know with 2 left feet, and no matter what you say, it's just not happening. Is it plausible for anyone to learn how to dance?
With Israel Radinku, anyone can dance. I've had a lot of people. I've had different races. I've had different ages. People come to my classes and then they tell me they have 2 left feet. After 1 or 2 classes, then they come back to me and say, wow, I never knew I can do this. You understand? So for me, everybody can dance. It just takes the good teacher or the right teacher in front of you to show you everything, where everything starts. Because in like today's lives, people they tend to look at the videos or YouTube or any other social media platform, and then they come to me and they say, now, like, I always tell them, listen, I look at you, I see what is it that you are capable, choreograph according to your capability. I do not just choreograph something that you can't do. You understand? So obviously, if you start there, like for example, with our syllabus, it is designed in a way that every grade has limit ages. I mean, for example, we start from the step up. Step up is for kids, for children in grade R. That work, when I go to classes and then I start teaching them the syllabus, I don't just do the syllabus the way it is, but I create some sort of how they can do it, how can they enjoy it. And especially with the kids, like your grade R's, your 5 year old, your 3 year old, you play music that also, it doesn't only allow them to only dance, but it also teaches them, like maybe the music will speak about colors or the ABCD. So that is something that is very familiar to them.
Israel,
And
what
then it's easier
Don?
to get
Yes,
it.
sorry, please do
Sorry.
continue.
And then now I was just saying, then it's easier for them to get the choreography. And when they get home, also they start dancing with their parents.
Yeah. Israel, what dance genres does your choreography and your syllabus entail?
Um, with me, I do a lot of genres because I've been I've been in hip hop crews, the crews where how the whole hip hop thing started. It started from the USA where people used to do the groups, small groups, and then they go dance off with other crews and stuff like that. I started from there. I started with hip hop there. Then going forward, when I went to the studio, that's when I started now with ballroom and Latin. Then from there with ballroom Latin, then all the dance genres, then they just followed. Then I did ballet, and then I did contemporary, and then Latin, and then modern, up until up, like all the genres that you can name it. I do all of it.
Israel, what dance style do you not go to? What dance form, what dance genre do you say, you know what, I see everything else, but this I just don't think is for me?
Pole dancing.
Smart response. Smart response. I see you. I see you. Let's walk in a day with Israel at the Israel Sai School of Dance. What does a typical day look like?
Hello, please. Can you please
Yes, just
repeat the
repeat.
question?
Yes. What does a typical day in your life at your school, at your dance school, look like? Walk us
Oh,
through the day-to-day activities. Yes.
busy, busy, busy. So firstly, we start with admin, and then studio setup, and then class begin. Preschoolers, primary schools, teens, and then sometimes I do outdoor dance classes. And then also in the evenings, I have wedding dance couples where couples they come, they just book per hour and whatever. And then in between, there are meetings as well, costume preps, and social media. Every day is different, but always filled with energy.
And when do you do the business? I heard you say admin. Is that the time for business? Making sure that the checks and balances are doing the right thing, that the business ledger is not falling apart. Is that when you deal with business in the morning?
Yes, like I said, every day it changes. Sometimes it's in the morning, sometimes it's like now in the evening. Sometimes when I'm in the bathroom, because that's where my peace is. And also,
Okay, Mr.
yeah,
Israel. Okay, okay.
yeah.
And let's talk about expansion plans. So, what is the long term goal for you? Are you looking to franchise your offering? Are you thinking perhaps just expansion of the one school? What's the game plan?
Oh yes, yes. To be honest, I want to take Israel's High School of Dance into more schools, especially in mining towns and rural areas like your Pukeng, your Bapong, you know, all those rural areas. Franchising is definitely on my horizon. My dream is to power others to open branches because there's a program which I've been thinking of. I also have proposals which I want to have a program that will at the end of the day maybe let others to also get the opportunity to open their own dance schools. obviously maybe under the Israel Size School of Dance franchise.
Wow. So yesterday was International Dance Day. Yes?
Yes.
And I'll be honest, I did not know this. I was yesterday years old when I learned that. What does a day like that mean to you personally?
I like to say movement is healing. It connects us beyond language, race, and background. On this International Dance Day, I encourage every South African to move. Whether it's a set of jump or a full routine, dance is freedom, dance is joy, dance is life.
Sure.
And today I'm enjoying myself. Here I am. I'm on radio.
Indeed, you are, Mr. Israel. Just for those who are looking to get into the industry, but they don't feel like it's as safe as studying to be a surgeon or studying to be a lawyer, even, right? It feels a bit, I want to say, almost the equivalent of entrepreneurship, where you are not certain that business will roll in. What would you say to somebody who's looking to pursue dance as a career path?
I'd say, do what sets your soul on fire. Because dance sets soul on fire, like for me. Now, safe doesn't mean happy. If you have a gift, honor it, but smart. But you must be very, very, very smart. Build skills, get mentorship, and work hard. Passion backed with strategy is powerful. So do what you tell yourself, do what makes sense to you, and also researches as well. Research, do a lot of research. I've always loved to be on stage. I've always loved to perform. But with the COVID, imagine if I had to choose me only being performing and whatsoever. So COVID hit, and most of the dancers, most of professional dancers had to go back home because they only wanted to perform, but they never thought of opening dance classes. So with me, I could still earn something in COVID because I could still do online dance classes.
Sure. And then lastly, Israel, as we simmer down and bring this conversation to a close, why Israel size? I've been looking at this name and I'm like, how bagit? Israel size School of Dance. School of Dance, yes. Israel, okay. Why size? What's going on over there?
All right, size. I'm a very short person. Yeah. Well, in physical aspect.
Yeah.
So I've always been, the shortest amongst the pack. Amongst all my friends, they're taller than me. So size is a stage name. Israel is my real name, and then size has always been my stage name. Actually, most people, they call me size one. So the reason why I came up with Israel size is the stage name which I got from the street. Like I said, we used to do crews and stuff like that, and it has always been my stage name. People knew me with size. And then when I got into the professional dance world, I had to use now my original name, Israel. So the main thing was to make sure that I get all my database. I get my fan base from the size, I get my fan base from the Israel. Then I connect them together, just so that people don't have to ask themselves, okay, yeah, we know size, but who is Israel? You understand?
Yeah.
So those are both my names.
Sure. Highly impressed. Listen, a man with a plan, hey? I can hear it. I can hear you thought about this long and hard. You said, listen, I'm going to amalgamate my fan base. I'm going to bring them together and bring out something very beautiful. And for that, we thank you so much. So we thank you for the work that you're doing. We hope to see Rustenburg become a place of absolute joy, because people are finding ways to express themselves outside the usual social media platforms, pictures, words. Maybe dance should be the next best thing for the lot, not just in Rustenburg, but across the continent. Thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Thank you so much. Can I leave you with these beautiful words, please?
Oh, please.
All right. I hope these words they go to the whole world. So these are my favorite words. These are the words that I always say to myself. Your background does not define your future. Talent alone is not enough. Pair it with discipline, faith, and consistency. Don't be afraid to start small. And don't wait for your passion. If the gift is creative, it's valid with the right mindset and support. You can build a career that reflects your passion. Thank you.
The voice of Israel Randiku, who so happens to be the founder of Israel Size School of Dance and a shining star of the Sibanye, Stillwater and Pagamani Impact Capital Youth in Mining ESD program, joining us this evening and telling us all about the power of dance.
Este é o Caleidoscópio de Canal África, com Remo Samo e João Yabalá.
O surto da cólera em Angola tem causado grande preocupação, afetando já mais de metade das províncias do país. Simultaneamente, a Agência dos Estados Unidos para o Desenvolvimento Internacional, USAID, um dos maiores doadores mundiais de assistência humanitária, decidiu não priorizar os países com maior incidência de malária. Para discutirmos as causas do alastramento da cólera em Angola e os impactos dessa decisão da USAID, convidamos o Dr. Jeremias Agostinho, médico e mestre em saúde pública, para partilhar a sua visão sobre o tema.
A doença, nesse momento, representa o maior risco de saúde pública que nós temos. Nos últimos anos, a nossa preocupação esteve sempre centrado com os casos de malária, os casos de tuberculose e também de infecção por VIH-Sida. A forma como, em pouco menos de 2 meses, os casos de cólera vêm aumentando, acaba por representar, nessa altura, um dos maiores desafios que o país tem. É expectável que, nesta fase, o número de casos venha a aumentar.
De segunda a sexta-feira, das 20 às 21 horas locais, este é o Caleidoscópio de Canal África.
turned in love with this syndicate because they give them something in return of them turning a blind eye. Point number 3, we have a problem of corruption that leads to us being a playground of this transnational organized crime.
Africa Update with Lulu Gabu, 12 to 1 p.m. Central African Time. Africa's very own think tank. This is Channel Africa Online. www.channelafrica.co.za.
all the way to Algeria, The Soothing Number by Suad Masi, this one titled Gir Inta. Welcome to it if you have just joined us. Before that, Diamond Platinums, and then kickstarting off the triple play, Kajanine coming in, taking us to Burundi with Walewa 2. It is the second hour of the show, 7 minutes after 11 p.m. Central African Time. And it's time for us to get into our next conversation. Now, I did tell you that this was a rather beautiful catch-up session with Thabiso Mongane. Just to let you know the context of the conversation, on the 21st of April, we were looking and observing and celebrating World Creativity and Innovation Day. And in light of that, we had an opportunity to spotlight a bold youth entrepreneur who's using original thinking to crack some of South Africa's toughest problems. Thabiso is a tech innovator whose company Thrift Online uses AI and IoT to bring predictive maintenance and asset tracking to mining, while also building fintech tools that support township spaza shops and tokenized agriculture, and this founded through that Zaka app. We got into so much more in the conversation. We looked at the realities of an entrepreneur and the purpose and place for an entrepreneur in the South African business landscape. Let's have a listen to this audio.
Heartlines, connecting you with Africa's love culture into the night on Channel Africa, the African perspective.
Thabiso, welcome to Heartlines. Let's start at the beginning. What sparked your interest in technology and innovation?
Hi, Sheila, but from the very beginning of my entrepreneurial, I think, inspiration, I've always kind of had a sense of trends and how they unfold in the world. And predominantly, at the time when I had actually then decided that I wanted to be an entrepreneur, I think, technology was, a growing space, a growing vertical within the whole global context. And what had initially happened is that I started out really at school selling, paraphernalia, hip-hop paraphernalia. And getting early success like that for me was a clear indication for me that, look, this is what I want to do. Mostly that it had the added incentive that you're a young guy with money in their pocket most of the time. So, having to experience that was a clear indication for me that business is what I wanted to do. But, we fast track from that story into my late teens, 19, 18, and I had a conversation with my mentor at the time, who then, knew and had always known that I want to go into business, and then encouraged me to think a bit more intentionally about how to do it differently. So I think, I've always seen technology as a differentiator. I've always seen it as a competitive advantage when it comes to actually building great businesses.
Interestingly enough, Thabiso, the 21st of April was World Creativity and Innovation Day. Do days like this mean anything to you as a creative, as an entrepreneur?
Well, look, I think it's almost important to really, cast, moments in every industry where, you can really highlight and create visibility around the work and the specific ideology within that industry and that space. But for me, creativity is not necessarily an occupation. What it is that it's a way of life. It's an approach. It's a way of thinking. And it's a way you're wired. And it can be taught as well. So I don't necessarily, give much reference to, specific days that celebrate, specific, I think, milestones or specific, industries or specific verticals. But, because this is my life, it's not something that I kind of opt in and out of. It's definitely how I live my life every day. It's how I think. It's my approach. It's how I do things.
So you come from a family of entrepreneurs, if I'm not mistaken?
Yeah, entrepreneurs, professionals, activists. It's a very interesting mix.
Tell me how that spilled into your aspirations and desires.
I mean, it's always a question of nature versus nurture, isn't it? And, growing up in a space of, I think, highly accomplished people was always, for me, a way of inspiration. And that's ultimately what actually happened to me. My nature and how I was nurtured essentially just fed into my interests. And that is the beautiful part about, I think, how I was raised. I was raised by a semi-liberal family, a religious family, but we were always filled with the option to actually, choose our own paths, but also filled with a lot of the interests that our parents and our elders actually had in life. And for me, that became a foundation of how I then, developed my own interests. And here we are, seeing my grandfather do what he did as a social entrepreneur, really focused on education, starting an early childhood development center for, our community and parents that could not necessarily afford the high cost of taking their kids to expensive early childhood development facilities, and really then doing that as a labor of not only love, but a labor of purpose. So that's what I've always grown up in. I've always grown up knowing that we have to be purposeful. It gives meaning to our lives and substance to it.
You had part of your career, and then I say this because I was reading up on you and how you had sold 11,000 loaves of bread in 10 days. You were in the banking space. It almost feels like your trajectory was mapped out, right? Like you wanted to get into the world of finance for the purposes of entrepreneurship. Is that the case?
Yeah. The most profound thing I've ever heard in my entrepreneurial journey, which ultimately stood the litmus test of time, but also the litmus test of form, has been the fact that entrepreneurship is a self-fulfilling prophecy. And ultimately, I started out at the beginning very clear on which spaces I would love to be an entrepreneur in. And not knowing exactly how I was going to do it, but somehow finding myself over the years, if I reflect back, having actually then been involved in all of those spaces. And that for me was just, I think the magic of life. It's part of those unspoken universal rules where, you say something to yourself and ultimately your mind, your body, your soul tries to go and find the response, the answer.
Toby, so let's talk about your viewpoint on entrepreneurship. I find it really interesting that you say that it's a prophecy fulfilled. Is entrepreneurship sector-based, according to you? Is the principle the same applied throughout every sphere and every, I suppose, context in which entrepreneurship can exist?
I think to really be able to define that and to answer that, we need to really backtrack a bit and start at the foundations of what the definition of an entrepreneur is. And what an entrepreneur is an entrepreneur is a problem solver. It's someone who recognizes problems, identifies them, and then really figures ways on how to actually solve those problems. And, that's ultimately what an entrepreneur is. So I don't necessarily believe that it's sector-based. I don't necessarily believe that it can be professionalized in that sense. I think that entrepreneurship is an approach, it's a philosophy, it's an ideology that can be taught. And that's essentially how I feel that it becomes, for me, one of the most critical ways to solve global problems. And people can argue, people can say that, doctors, lawyers are problem solvers as well. Yes, they are. And how that ultimately gets manifested is as entrepreneurs. Doctors open practices and doctor suites. Lawyers open their own practices and so on and so forth. So that's just to give you, I think, a much more practical explanation of the philosophy of entrepreneurship and its capabilities.
Now, the reality is that the life of an entrepreneur is far different from he or she who's employed. The comfort of a salary, at the end of the month, you're going to be met with your inputs gain, I suppose. It's one thing to be a problem solver, but a problem solver who might not earn every month could be a bit tricky to deal with.
I think Simon Sinek said it quite perfectly when he was explaining the concept of the golden circle. And he says that you need to first start with your why. And ultimately that is I think an internal conversation that everybody who dares to venture into entrepreneurship has to ask themselves, why am I doing this? That ultimately will then lead to you being able to respond and answer another set of questions. And the set of questions that I'm talking about in this instance is, how resilient are you? If your why is great enough, your resilience will really rise to the occasion. It will be, directly proportionate to your why. And that's what it takes to be an entrepreneur. It takes you knowing your purpose, and it takes you being resilient enough to know exactly why you started and being true to that. And that's why I've got so much respect for entrepreneurs. I mean, you can only but sit and give reverence and just admiration to women and men who have essentially made those sacrifices in the beginning, unsure of anything, unsure of where their next check is going to come from, unsure of how they're going to put food on the table, but yet remaining true to that purpose and seeing it through to the point where it does now become fruitful. And that for me is one of the most spiritual journeys that any human being could ever put themselves through.
Fundamentally, an entrepreneur solves problems. It almost feels like the African continent is going through a discourse that's far more slower than other continents in terms of the developments of technology. And so it almost feels to an extent that the technology that is exposed to us is a misfit for the problems we want to solve in our day-to-day experiences. And I say this due to factors such as infrastructure and the like, but you're proving that isn't necessarily the case. How do we create solutions that are tailor-made for the African continent without trying to jump onto this bandwagon of being the fastest in technology, having the latest tech?
I think the biggest bubble that was ever created was the African technology startup space, because how it was iterated on is that it was iterated on as some form of replica of Silicon Valley, and the fact that I think problem solution fit is far less superior than valuation growth. And what I mean by valuation growth is that in the United States, you can literally raise a lot of capital for startups and problems that are not really I think relevant to a greater amount of the populace that's actually in that country. And the case in point would be how a startup that basically developed a drone that can deliver boutique and designer coffees and drinks into high-rise buildings in Silicon Valley, and how they raised a lot of money. So I think we need to really then backtrack. I think that we really need to sit down and say that are African startups really identifying problems, actual African problems, and are they actually building solutions towards them? And I think that's where we need to do a bit more work. The problem solution, convergence, the problem solution fits within the African context is really problematic, and that's why we've really then lagged behind, because entrepreneurs, and this is truly my belief, African entrepreneurs went and they saw the actual amount of success that you can get by gaining recognition from capital, private capital, institutional capital in Western countries, and we wanted to play to that tune and not necessarily stay true to form, stay true to our own issues, our own problems here on the continent. And that has become an issue that has plagued even just the venture capital space on the African continent, and why it's slowed down. Because the bubble has really reached its pressure point and it's about to pop, and everybody's starting to realize that, look, maybe we need to actually be more invested in African entrepreneurs and startups and SMMEs that are solving real communal problems within their own locales, within their own geographies. And that's what we're starting to see kind of really happen and be refined and fine-tuned at this point in juncture.
With that being said, are the prospects for success on the rise, and are they tangible? And I'm asking this because here sits an innovator, an entrepreneur who has been working on the most recent kinds of technology to solve problems, yet understands that infrastructure isn't necessarily available to them for South Africa. They take their solution out of the context of the African continent, sell it to other continents, and feel as though this is more profitable than me trying to invest in the continent now. Do we see prospects for success in this present day?
I mean, there's several prospects of success that I, for instance, have been exposed to, and I know personally, and those have really been based on, I think, highly intelligent entrepreneurial founders, guys and girls that literally have been so dedicated at their craft that they've developed an acumen for decision making that's really different, that's really ingenuitive and creative. And I think that's what it's really going to take. The infrastructure problems, guys. They're not going to be solved overnight. They do actually subject your interests. They subject your will. They subject your passions and your business to a much more political conversation. And I've always said that once that happens, then you must really then understand that you are moving away from building a business to doing something else. And that's what entrepreneurs need to be mindful of. Work around it. You know, if you can't get over it, then get around it. If you can't get through it, then get around it. That's the only thing that you can do. And part and parcel of that is figuring out the route of least resistance, the simplest way to get to the most effective answer. And also, I think, spending a lot of time with your customers, which is something that we forget to do. It's all well and good to build a business in your mind and literally conceptually, but it's another thing to actually then run one that's successful. And that requires you to spend a lot of time with your customers, trying to actually then solve their problems in the most basic form. And once you've figured out how to do that, then you can figure out how to actually scale that and layer more technology on top of it to really then improve it. And that's all technology really does. It's got nothing to do with an innovative approach. What technology does is that it becomes a tool, an instrument of you improving your results, you improving your solution, and you making it more efficient and more scalable. And that's really what technology is about.
Yeah. Toby, so you've got a few successful projects under your belt. And before we get into those projects such as Thrift Online or Zaka, let's talk about you selling 11,000 loaves of bread in 10 days. So what did you do? How?
I mean, you see, just to your previous point on what you just spoke about, infrastructure and those challenges. When we started Thrift was initially built as an e-commerce platform, a platform that was basically first of its kind at a primary informal marketplace level. And what it was is that it was meant to basically be able to aggregate the buying power of informal retailers and increase their level of competitiveness in the market. And we realized that as individual actors, as they're moving as individual actors, that's going to be extremely hard. But if we can aggregate their buying power and we can actually bring them to the table and represent their collective buying power and their collective will, we have a much better chance of negotiating better deals for them. And we did that. You spent 3 months in a spaza shop out in Netherlands, really then studying how those dynamics actually go. And it was crazy because the things I learned really then kind of, course corrected our path and our approach to say that we might not be solving what we think we're solving for, and the way we're trying to solve it might not necessarily be the way or the best way to solve it. And then, the whole spin-off comes in to say that was technology really needed? Not necessarily. So we then get into it and we decide that, look,
perhaps it might not be in our interest and in anyone else's interest to try and actually solve the entire value chain issues within the informal retail space. But how about we choose selective products that we think are actually fast lines, fast-moving lines, and lines that potentially do and can have a massive scalable impact. And we chose bread. So I then decided to then, as a single actor, take my company's money and spend it on buying our first 700 loaves of bread in day one. But I had analyzed the market, and I realized that, look, the way the infrastructure is set up in the township, we have these puzzle shops that are literally about 2-3 meters away from each other. So there's a concentration of them in a single area. And I saw how, other bread companies or bakery companies are so complacent about it, literally delivering bread at around 2:30 in the afternoon. I'm like, but who's consuming bread at that time? For me, it didn't make any sense. It was like, if we can get to these customers faster, earlier, we can essentially then sell more loaves. And we did that. Bought our first 700 loaves in day one. And we started to actually then deliver the bread literally in a 1400 Nissan bakkie, a little tiny bakkie. And we would actually then deliver bread in that immediate vicinity of ours. And literally the bread sold out day one. This was a pattern that we repeated for that 10 days. But we noticed that the word was spreading fast, that there are guys who managed to undercut the price of bread by, 2 Rand, 1 Rand 50. Now in that market, you can only get a margin off of bread max at about 70 cents as a last mile or as a retailer at a retail price level. And we managed to actually aggregate the buying power and actually negotiate cheaper prices. So it was flying off the shelves. So we moved from day 1, 700, day 2, the order doubles, and it just keeps growing very rapidly. As we reached day 10, and we were on the 11,000 mark, I get a call from one of the biggest bread manufacturers in the country, which is basically the brand that we're stocking up on. And they say to me that, look, we've noticed that you're selling bread to our clients. And I'm like, but wait, nobody's written, that they're your client. Nobody has a signpost outside saying, hey, we are whoever's client. So it's a free market. I can sell bread anywhere I want to. That's where the murky waters started to actually appear. Because at that point, what essentially happened is that the biggest player in the country, and how it hit me was that the biggest player in the country was essentially micromanaging and also just in complete control of that market. And they were dictating who could actually participate and who couldn't. And I had to get around them. So, we had that tussle where we actually spoke about the fact that I'm selling to their customers, and if I continue to do this, I'm literally taking business away from their own delivery guys or distributors, and they're going to stop and cut my supply. Sat down with the senior management team and tried to convince them that, look, I've developed an approach that could be beneficial for everybody here. I just need to be given the support, but they weren't buying into it. And that's when, it got a bit sketchy. I continued to try and do what I do. You get now the proverbial death threats from time to time where you get a random call of someone saying that, look, you're looking for trouble. You need to stop this. And I knew from that moment on that I managed to upset, an entire market, just as a single boy doing what I do. And that's, I think, a great example of how you don't necessarily need technology. You just need to have an innovative approach as how you actually identify the problem and how you solve it. Fast track, from that moment on, I then decided to get my own trademark for bread. And obviously very emotional, but also very chuffed with myself. I then decided that I want to manufacture my own bread, or line of bread, and we got the trademark done. We got, a key strategic supplier, which would be a bakery out in North Riding that would then essentially then bake the product and put it out on the shelves with us. It's just the fact that, it really got, and it really was clear to me that it is syndicated and it's not a space that I essentially want to try and break into without the right basis of capital. So we veered off from that and we took another different approach completely.
Sure. So what's really interesting is you highlighting the realities of monopolies. My question is, how do we dethrone monopolies?
I think that's a conversation that I've had for many years. And in retrospect, as I reflect on it, I think an earlier me or a previous version of me would have answered it and said that yes, dethrone monopolies. It's completely possible. Let's take radical moves or make radical stances on it and so on and so forth. But then I kind of had to be exposed to the reality of our economy and how it's structured. These monopolies are big, employers. These monopolies are essentially big economic contributors. And I don't necessarily think that it should be a case of dethroning them. But I think that we really need to look at how can we actually decentralize value chains and decentralize marketplaces. And what it really taught me, and then I've heard a lot of buzzwords around the township economy and how to go about it, and how foreigners need to also just make way for locals. But at the end of the day, you have to appreciate the skill set, the unique skill set that's been developed over time, over practice by these specific actors in the market. And my approach has completely changed now to really then saying that this is a value chain conversation. Young South Africans need to look at the value chain and really pick their place in it. And why I'm saying this is because one of the propositions that I had actually made with the bread was to say to the spaza shop owner that I was operating with, that I had partnered with, say that, why don't you just quit selling everything else and just focus on one specific product line that you can distribute into this township? And suddenly now you start to see the possibilities of, distribution within the value chain becoming a proposition for South Africans. Where we say, okay, fine, the retail front is already gone. You've got our foreign brothers that are actually doing it better. How about then we come in and we say we're going to actually then take over the distribution front? And the condition of that would be that if you operate in our communities, then you have to buy from our communities. Do you not think that could solve everything almost instantaneously? It could. If 5 of those spaza shops in your community are getting all of their toilet paper from you, then you're the toilet paper guy in that community. If 5 of them are getting their bread from you, then you're the bread guy in that community. And that was an analysis that had to be learned through practice, through trial and error, through literally skin in the game. And that is how I got to that determination to say that we're looking at it too wrong. We're looking at it from a position of trying to make radical stances and politicizing it. And that's why the change is not coming as fast as we would like to actually see it. I mean, if you do have a monopoly that's dethroned, what replaces it? And that's the question, the kind of like laid in the question that you asked. What replaces it? If you have, foreign nationals in the retail front that leave abruptly or forced out abruptly, what replaces them? And I think that there's definitely room for everybody to play at this table and really then get their slice of the pie, if I can put it that way. It's there. It's just about developing a creative and resourceful way of getting to it. And one of the ways that I've analyzed is to really look at value chains much more intently as the point of change and where you can actually drive change. What can be contributed and improved in the value chain that young South Africans can essentially then really create an industry out of? And that's what we really need to start asking ourselves.
Terry, so you spoke about decentralizing the value chain, and I think we've been sold the idea that wealth comes from establishing business that lives lifelong, even after you have gone. And it almost feels like monopolizing, or rather deconstructing the setting of a monopoly in a context is exactly what one needs in order for them to establish that wealth platform. What are your thoughts on that?
So, I'm a big activist and I think believer in, for instance, decentralized markets and decentralization as a whole. And one of the ways I've kind of manifested that is through my interest in blockchain and how we've developed a business in that. And my view is that those traditional models of centralization, of monopolization, have, of course, been predominantly what has built the world that we live in now, but they're unsustainable. And they're increasingly becoming volatile. And we're seeing this in how the global world order, business is essentially then trying to break out and redevelop itself in many ways. Great examples of this were COVID-19 and how that actually then precipitated a new era of work, for instance, that we never thought would be possible. And I'm saying to you that essentially, as the world is developing, as more shocks, more conflict, more posterity is actually then emerging, you are finding that it is much more important to have conversations around decentralization and start exploring ideas around it. In this instance, I think that, if you do not decentralize, you are going to actually then, exacerbate the poverty base in the country. That exacerbation of that poverty base will essentially then be what actually destroys your businesses. And vis-a-vis, we're seeing this through, the localized rioting, the localized protesting and protest actions that actually damage businesses and their assets. Very unique to this was the July unrest, which is a very great example in recent times for us, and how that actually then precipitated Sasria, for instance, as an issue of last resort to kind of pull out from that role, because there's an analysis, there's an existential threat that they had to do post that period to say that, look, the market risk that we face here is the fact that the South African economy is not developing fast enough, not decentralizing quick enough to create enough opportunities for South Africans. And if we continue to make this our value proposition, we're just going to be hemorrhaging money, because more protests are going to happen, more riots are going to happen. And that is a sign of the times that I feel that we're ignoring, that if we don't actually then, I think, take a moment to pause, reflect, and make commitments to change, we're essentially just going to really then land in the same position that we're in, if not worse, in July.
So let's circle back to Thrift Online and Zaka.
So Zaka then, comes in and it becomes a flagship product of Thrift Online, which is really, it emerges from another analysis and another kind of lesson that we learned to say that, look, to try and go and antagonize these monopolies might be a bit difficult, but there is definitely a pain point in this specific market. And that pain point is access to finance, access to capital, access to financial resources. Because of how these businesses are set up, because of the limitations and the depth of financial literacy, you then realize that they are not really participating and are not being given, any form of expression on financial services platforms or financial markets. And that's how Zaka was born. And it was really born to really be able to help informal retailers who are otherwise on the peripheral of financial services, to help them be able to build financial identities. The same identity that allows you and I to be able to walk into a bank and get a loan, finance a vehicle, finance a home. And that was one of the things that we realized was really short and was really stunting growth in that space. And Zaka then becomes this tool that we've built to basically be able to do that. Interestingly enough, we've then, in the piloting phase, did a bit of an experiment with Township Flavor and Reza Babuile. And what happened in that instance is that they had decided that they want to develop a financial services proposition, but they're not a financial services company. And we helped them flesh that out by really building a model that will help them basically then issue loans to their early childhood development centers. So these are the beneficiaries of their programs, their training programs that they wanted to start issuing loans to. And again, you must realize how life just brings you full circle. My inspiration was really founded on an early childhood development center. And here I am years later, really trying to help early childhood development centers basically access financial services. And we sat there and we worked with them to really try and develop, a very unique, perspective and a very unique model of how their beneficiaries can access financial services by looking at sets of information, sets of financial data that was very specific and unique to them. And saying that it doesn't have to be a one-size-fits-all where, every client has to fit through a single door that's designed in a single way. How about we look at you from a perspective of how you operate in your business? So from there, we developed, an approach to actually collect metadata instead of traditional data sets like, your payslip, your 3-month bank statement. We wanted to look at alternative sets of data. So we looked at things like whether this person is, at their business, 9 times out of 10, or their place of business 9 times out of 10. Because as a small business owner, we all know that you have to be hands-on. And if this person wasn't, then that flagged as a risk. And that's how Zaka actually came about. It came about as a way of actually then helping what would otherwise be, a marginalized market, a marginalized set of consumers basically be able to participate in the financial services space by developing financial data on them that was relevant and that made sense.
And then let's talk about the broader aspect of Thrift Online.
So Thrift has always been a conduit to my own entrepreneurial interests. When it started out, obviously it was answering the e-commerce play, branched out into being a financial services firm, and then also really branched out to answer, my other interest, which has always been mining and energy. So that is how Thrift has basically then gotten into the mining space, currently, supplying services and technology into that space. And really that's been one of the spin-offs or the pivots that we took to not only answer my own, personal interest in these specific verticals, but to also kind of really then respond to the question of whether we can actually, industrialize and form an industrial company. I think that's one of the things that always irked me. The fact that we don't have enough black industrialists has always been a sore point for me, and I wanted to answer that. And that's how Thrift came about. The Sibanye Stillwater Youth and Mining Program became a nice platform for us to accelerate the visibility on what we do. And it's actually been quite incredible for us, so far so good, to really then form this new proposition in the industrial space. We have done, a couple of projects at this point. It's very interesting as well. But yeah, we're just looking to grow that proposition. We're looking to actually then engage problems with more industrial companies and seeing how we can actually help them become better.
And Tabi, so just to square off the conversation, ours is to gauge you on the possibilities, the plausibilities of tangibly fixing society. To the individual who's listening right now, who's saying, listen, I've heard quite a bit of what you're saying, and I'm truly excited to participate in the problem-solving strategies of the continent, of my country, of my city. Where does the journey begin for you?
I think for any South African that's looking to actually solve problems, you need to go and find the community or communities that are already doing that. And by community, I generally mean, organizations, other individuals that have that similar shared passion and interest. The reason why I'm saying this is that it really then becomes a think tank for you to reflect on some of your own ideas, but also to actually refine them and criticize them. And that's essentially what I started doing, and how I actually then, kind of ignited the passion that I have for problem solving. Meet other problem solvers. Go and meet them. Go and spend time with them. Help them build communities and be part of building these communities to amplify the problem solving and those opinions and those ideas. Post that, you then need to actually then start to ideate. You need to sit down and really ask yourself, is the problem that I've identified, is it really a problem? How big is that problem? Who does it affect? and how would they want me to actually then solve their problem? And that's the questions that you're going to only be able to answer if you spend time with the people that these problems affect. So, it's a two-pronged approach. You need to go and find the communities that are already thinking about the same things. Then you need to go and spend time with people who are affected by the problems that you've identified.
Tevisa, thank you so much for joining us.
It's an absolute pleasure, Sheila. I've thoroughly enjoyed this, and I'm very grateful for the opportunity to just, ignite whichever young minds that I possibly can with my ideas, my approach, and just share my story.
Heartlines bring you fresh perspectives about love after dark. With Sheila Ndikumana.
Bébé, tu sais que sans toi, moi je n'ai pas de vie. Je ferai tout pour toi, t'as pas besoin de le dire. Et si je t'ai fait du mal, Nika, baby, I'm sorry. Je te porterai dans mon cœur jusqu'à mon dernier souffle. Even in the light, t'es ma baby pour ma...
It is 9 minutes before midnight in Central African time. Sido Che coming in with Okeji, the remix, taking us to Mali. If you have just joined us, we are wrapping up Heartlines with Sheila Ndikumana, but do not despair. The show does go on, and by that, I quite literally mean after this, there's another show, so do not touch your dial. DSTV's 802 is where you find us. If not, 628 on OpenView HD. We are readily available for you on that SABC Plus app. And lastly, take us everywhere you go. www.channelafrica.co.za. With that being said, just wrapping off conversations that we had today, looking at the very first hour, beautiful, inspirational conversation. I think one for me that will live lifelong in my head. And I say this because we looked at the power of dance, and we traveled all the way to the northwest in South Africa, and this with Israel Randiku, who is the founder of a beautiful school known as the Israel Size School of Dance, and of course a rising shining star of the Sibanye Stillwater and Pagamani Impact Capital Youth in Mining ESD program. And so we looked at Israel's journey, but also how Israel had used his pains, his struggle, his strife to sort of find purpose with so much dignity, so much hope, so much resilience, and I think ultimately transformation, not just for himself, but for the community at large. And then we went into conversations that we had with Thabiso Mongane, who is a tech innovator whose company Thrift Online uses AI and IoT to bring predictive maintenance and asset tracking to mining, while also building fintech tools that support township spaza shops and tokenized agriculture. And this platform noted as Zaga. Those were the two conversations we had. It's now time for us to touch base with Morris Touch, who broadcasts live from our Bulawayo studios. Morris Touch, good evening to you. I see that we can see you. Oh my goodness. How are you doing, sir?
I'm very well. How are you doing?
I am fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. Firstly, that's a lovely... Pardon?
It feels awkward that I can see you.
It should not be awkward, Morris. This is the way of the future, okay? We're now transitioning into future things, futuristic things. I love the banner, the Channel Africa banner. Is that a painting?
No, it's actually it's not painting. It's signage.
It's signage. All right. Morris, what comes up on the show this morning?
All right, we've got, it's the 1st of May, hey? Am I right?
Absolutely, yes.
Yes, the 1st of May. So we've got so much, like you remember I told you that we are starting a brand spanking new month. There's that excitement that we're starting the month of May and Africa Month. There's so much that will be happening. I want to talk about, the guys that were there during the formation of the AU. Way back in 1963, but I want to focus mostly on the music side of that time. What exactly was playing at that time when OAU was formed? Remember, it was the Organization of African Unity. But I want to look at the musical side of the whole formation. What role music played as far as the whole process is concerned. There are so many musicians that came through at that time, and one can the ones that quickly come to mind. You would think of Miriam Makeba. You would think of Johnny Bokelos from the Democratic Republic of Congo. You will think of all these other artists that we have celebrated through the passage of time, and their role was very, very critical in the formation of the OAU, though they were not politically involved, but their music played a very pivotal role. So that's what I will be looking at today on today's show. What was your conversation all about today?
We were looking at the mining space, essentially. We were focusing highly on mining, but through various aspects. So firstly, we traveled to a mining town, and we explored the culture and the power of dance in Rustenburg. And then we followed this up with a conversation on how we can become more innovative for the African continent. More often than not, we try and rush ahead and use the latest tech, and maybe sometimes, Morris, it's not needed. We need solutions that speak to the African continent. And so that conversation we had with Thabiso Mongane.
I love that. Actually, in the afternoon, I was having a conversation with someone, but our conversation was solely centered on food, the food that we consume. That you know what, the food that we have here in Africa, when you go overseas, you can't afford it. It's meant for the rich and famous. But we take our food, we take our fruits and everything else for granted. So yeah, I think that conversation definitely makes sense. Not in a long, distant future, you need to also touch on the importance of our food and the nutrition that it has, and the importance that it has in us keeping ourselves very healthy. And yeah, I think basically that's it.
Morris, I love it. Now you're taking over production. Come on now. Becoming the producer of Heartlines. Well done to you, sir. Listen, let me love and leave you. Thank you so much for joining us, Morris.
It's been good. Take care of your good self and have a lovely holiday.
Likewise, the voice of Morris Touch, the host of the Afro Republic. Catch him in the next 3 minutes as he takes over, steering you into the continent's musical prowess. It will be the 1st of May. You know that this is Africa Month, and so Morris has an entire focus on this month, and you do not want to miss out on some of his findings concerning the continent. And he starts off with the AU, which I think will be very interesting to unravel. From the team and I, it has been a pleasure keeping you company. Until tomorrow on Labor Day, hopefully you will be taking it easy, relaxing, detoxing, de-stressing. That's my hope for you. Let's meet again at 10 p.m. all the way through to midnight. For now, cheers.
My people, open your eyes and answer the call of the drum. Freely more freely.